the layer of maturity, and that's pretty cool. And that's what you guys talk about a lot, I think. And wonderful to hear your lessons. So the first one I heard more in the podcast I listened to of yours than any of the others, and that is knowledge, just simply knowing how money works, how budgets work, how the stock market works, how freedom works in relation to money, how you put together money, how you have a plan and structure it so that you can live the life you want to live. In that cubicle, I was plotting out, can I sell my practice? Should I move to Costa Rica? How can I get free? Because I had a passion, and my passion was not a financial guru, not to be a visionary thought leader. My passion was to be an artist and to be a spiritual, to live a deep spiritual life. So those were my two passions, and the world just did not give me a path to do that and give me money. There was this saying back then, do what you love and the money will follow. We go through a darkness, we come to a moment of awakening, and then we expand, and we're able to do many more things. Just an incredible thing. It is a hero's journey. What you guys have done is heroic, and you're now modeling that with your podcast, which is really cool. But everybody has their version of that in a way, and it's this trajectory, right? From birth to death. And there's a story. So we've all got our stories. And the question that what I realized with that, and this is back to life planning and the 3 questions.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I am so excited today. The rain is pitter-pattering on the outside of my house. It's spring is coming. Everything is in bloom. And today we have one of my heroes on the show, Jackie, one of your heroes too. And you learned from his works as part of your CFP and AFC education. But I started my journey as a late starter reading The 7 Stages of Money Maturity. And today, Jackie, we get to talk to the author, George Kender. What do you think?
We get to be in the same space as wonderful people like George Kender. And obviously, he's had such an impact on you. As you know, part of my program at Kansas State was financial therapy, and George Kender was like the top of the hierarchy as far as financial psychology, living a better life. And we'll talk more about his work and how, to me, he kind of changed how we look at financial planning by coming up with his whole new genre. So I'm excited too.
Our audience may not know who he is. He's sort of the best kept secret in financial planning for some reason, and we need to shout it to the mountaintops and bring him to the forefront of our late starter audience, because they will benefit from his teachings really well. And this is only going to scratch the surface. We're hoping to pique your interest into diving deeper into all the work that he's done. But let me introduce him. George Kender is an author, a poet, an accomplished photographer, international thought leader, consummate Renaissance man, and visionary futurist. He's known as the father of life planning. George has been at the forefront of the financial services industry for decades. He spearheaded a movement that centers the lives that clients long to live within their own financial plan. Through his books, workshops, and keynotes, George has introduced thousands of professionals globally to the field of financial life planning. His 3 books on money, The 7 Stages of Money Maturity, Lighting the Torch, and Life Planning for You, are considered foundational works in delivering client-centered advice. After nearly 30 years as a practicing financial planner and tax advisor, George founded the Kender Institute of Life Planning in 2003. Under his leadership, George's Kender Institute has taught over 6,000 professionals across 30 countries through its immersive experiential training programs. His recent book focuses on civilization, starting with the Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness, understanding civilization as both human evolution and the evolution of environments of freedom, which is what we're talking about today, people. His passion is to help create a civilization that is organically fosters the best of humanity as it diminishes its very worst. I just read his latest book, The 3 Domains of Freedom, and here he inspires readers to experience 3 profound freedoms: the freedom of each moment, the freedom to live one's life's purpose, and the freedoms of civilization. He advocates a sustainable approach for institutions to prioritize humanity, democracy, the earth, Gaia, as we would say, and the truth above all their own self-interest, a concept he terms fiduciary in all things, or fiat. My claim to fame is that George and I went to the same high school, and we're reminiscing about that just moments ago. George, welcome to Catching Up to Five.
What an intro, Bill. My golly. Thank you so much, and wonderful to connect. We've connected briefly, but at a great distance. So nice to actually see your face and hear your voice.
Well, you live your life in England, in Massachusetts, and in Maui. Why all those three places? Why does it take three places to live life?
That's a really good question. It was one place at a time, but I think my passion from the very beginning, and possibly from birth, my passion has been for freedom. And the first place that I found freedom was here on a pond called Spectacle Pond, not far from Walden Pond in Massachusetts. And it felt like paradise to arrive here. I'd always wanted to live in the country. I'd grown up in the country, not too far from where you guys are, but Southern Ohio was where I grew up. And then I just lived in the Northeast pretty much. I discovered Maui and I'm like, whoa, holy cow. And I moved to live with an indigenous community in Maui, one of the smallest towns and most indigenous towns in the Hawaiian Islands. And then London came up. It was a really weird thing. I know we're going to talk about some of my visioning exercises for people. And in one of those visioning exercises about 15 years ago, out of the blue, in answer to the most profound question, the city of London came up. And it was basically calling me and saying, you got to come over here. And from then on, I've spent a couple of months a year over there. And it's a great place for me, working internationally, to engage with financial institutions, with advisors all over Europe. So it's a wonderful kind of place to be for me.
Well, I would call you a financial anthropologist. In many ways, you are a historian and a futurist at the same time, and an anthropologist, because you're looking at how money, fiat currency, financial planning all intersect with what it means to be human and what it means to live a fulfilling life, right?
Right on, that's it. And too often, and you guys know this, too often people get looped into money in crazy ways, and they don't put who they are really meant to be first. And I know your frame on it is a freedom frame, and that's my frame too.
Yeah, I mean, I read your book, The 7 Stages of Money Maturity, and it was kind of like a rebirth for me. And we're now, 30 years later, and you're writing a new book that's shorter, that distills all this information. But let's go through, so people understand what the 7 stages are. Take us through what those are, because our late starters live these stages as well. They just don't know it.
Yeah. I mean, the 7 stages, it's something I gathered from philosophical and religious and literary traditions from all over the world, and really trying to put something together. I can't claim it as being totally original because I borrowed it from many different places. And it's a notion about how we grow as human beings, how we're meant to grow. And that money, in a way, maps that first with our grasping nature, our desires, and kind of getting lost in it. And then we mature. And then from that maturity, so there are 3 basic phases. One is childhood, where we're kind of wrestling with it. We don't really know, and we're just driven by our feelings mostly. And then adulthood, where hopefully we grow in and learn some lessons of maturity. That's the second huge stage. And then the third frame is what I call awakening or maturity. But there's the 7 stages. 2 of them are in the first, are in childhood, and then 3 in adulthood, and then 2 in maturity or awakening. So the 2 in childhood, those are the ones we kind of get caught by, and we really don't know what we're doing is the main thing that you see in it. But what happens is we have some kind of messages that we begin to live our life by. Often they come from our parents. Sometimes they are in reaction to our parents. Could be either way. Or it could be from some other life lesson. But we haven't gained maturity. We don't really know. So we act in those ways. They're belief systems. And the notion is that every belief system, just about, I would say, is partial. There's always an exception to it and incomplete, meaning you could even frame the opposite for most belief systems that aren't just simply about virtue. So the belief systems catch us up. We think the world is one way, and we have some tough lessons. Those tough lessons bring up the second stage, which I call pain. But it's emotions that we don't know really how to handle and what to do with. So it could be the basic three darker emotions of fear and sadness and anger, or it can be all different kinds. It can be envy and jealousy and humiliation. There are a whole bunch, anxiety, frustration. So what happens is that those innocent messages, those beliefs that don't quite work, get hooked to these emotions. And what I realized was that that's a structure of suffering. If you think about the last time you didn't feel so good about yourself or about the world and what was happening there. And usually there was some belief system about the way it's supposed to be, or I want it to be. And then the sense that it isn't, and these uncomfortable feelings, they get hooked together. And I call that the structure of suffering. So that's the first layer. And then the next layer is the layer of maturity, and that's pretty cool. And that's what you guys talk about a lot, I think. And wonderful to hear your lessons. So the first one I heard more in the podcast I listened to of yours than any of the others, and that is knowledge, just simply knowing how money works, how budgets work, how the stock market works, how freedom works in relation to money, how you put together money, how you have a plan and structure it so that you can live the life you want to live. So that's the knowledge piece. But there's two other elements to maturity that I think that are really important. One of them I call understanding. And it's this area of how do you deal with jealousy, rage, terror, fear, paranoia. These are things that are coming up right now in civilization a lot, but they come up with money, all the time. And of course, civilization is pulling the rug out from under a bunch of people. So that can throw the money loop, can make it go pretty crazy. So what happens is that we get hooked again by our fear, our anger, our sadness, our depression, and understanding is this middle layer in the maturity, in the three things in maturity, of three things of adulthood. And it's where we learn to be at ease in the midst of difficult feelings. It's where we learn that they're primarily sensations in the body. And it's one of the ways that mindfulness comes in and helps, I think. But the anger is only a problem if my ego gets hooked. And it's only going to get hooked if I've got some idea that I'm clinging to around this anger. And then I'm in bad shape. And even after all my years, I can occasionally fall into it, I must say. It's just part of being human. So the skills in understanding are great. It's about learning to let your thoughts go. And they're basically meditative or contemplative skills. Learning to let your thoughts go and learning to let your feelings be. So getting to know those feelings is incredible. It's like going to a great movie, because the movie takes you through this arc, right? You go down into the depths and then you rise up. And that's what really a healthy relationship with difficult feelings involves, is it involves feeling it in a deep way that's rich and transformative, heroic even. And so that's the understanding element. And then the third one is vigor. Can't do nothing unless you got some big, you got to have some vitality, man, right? You got to get going. And I heard that in both your stories when you woke up and you go, hey, I'm going for it. I know what I'm going for and I'm going to make it happen. And that vigor piece is extremely important. And one of the insights I had, and I know we'll cover this, is that there are many ways of getting it. And you guys got it in a variety of ways. And I would say that you had part of what my teaching. It didn't matter because you got it, you landed it. But the teaching that I came up with was what I realized is if people had a really kind of brilliant vision of who they wanted to be, who they really wanted to be, that vigor gets stimulated like nobody's business. It's just amazing. And then they can do almost anything. They're almost superhuman if they realize they can actually have that because they've got enough knowledge or they've got the right financial advisor, supporter who says, hey, you can have that, you can do it. Then they get tremendously invigorated. And when you put those three together, knowledge, the heart, so the brain, the heart, and the body, put those three things together, man, and boy, you're going for it. And you're going to deliver something. And what the two things at the top of the heap here, in the final stage of maturity or awakening, are what I call vision and aloha. And of course, aloha comes from my time in Hawaii. Getting to live in the midst of people who've lived there for 1,000 years is really something. But before I get to aloha, vision, the way I'm using it there, it's just a term of art. And vision is simply seeing what's necessary in your community around you and having the knowledge, understanding, and vigor to make it happen. And you called me a visionary early on. And that's where the 3 Domains of Freedom book comes from. I mean, the first book, 7 Stages, comes from that too. But that 3 Domains is like, here I am as a visionary, and this is what we need to do in civilization and for ourselves to be really free. But the final stage I call aloha. And in aloha, it is more personal. It's like meeting a great mentor, meeting somebody who just surprises you with their kindness or grace. You might never see them again. It might be a moment in a grocery store. It could be anywhere. And they stun you with how gracious they are. And how I think of it, it's like the passing of a blessing from one person to another, regardless of economic difference. As we grow, I think we realize what a wonderful thing both to receive as youngsters and all, and as we grow older, to deliver those surprises to people. We may never see them again, but if we can give them something gracious like that, that really settles everything and gives them the ability to move through those difficult stages early on. So those are the 7 stages.
Those are beautiful. And, as you were going through those stages, I'm thinking in my head about some of the stages that I went through and our late starters for sure. Like the vigor to me kind of stood out. It's like some people have trouble finding their vigor, or that is almost like that peak where you're doing something else. And then of course I referenced you as a visionary because you created this life planning and it was something that did not exist until you had this vision. And we're going to go back and talk about that foundation and like where you started and how did you start to discover that I think things need to be a little different. And this birthed an entire new genre. So this is something that all of our late starters should walk through.
Well, what's interesting to me, Jackie, is George's life kind of mirrors his teachings. What I mentioned before was the vision there is he's kind of in a cubicle. But look what's happened from the cubicle here. And your life has exploded at each stage. You went from being a tax accountant to a certified financial planner where you're dealing with the money. Then you realized the piece was missing and you went to certified life planner, which is like we're helping them with their lives, their dreams, their goals. And then you move on to local communities, society, and civilization. Your vision has gotten bigger with each stage of your life, George, right?
No question about it, Bill. No question about it. And, a lot of times we think if only we, the human species, can be kinder or more thoughtful, that everything will work out. And there's a lot of truth to that. But there's also a lot of truth to if we don't have structures that facilitate that flourishing for ourselves and for our neighbors and for civilization, that even if we all, but a handful of us do that, that handful could very well be at the top of hierarchies of power, and there we are starting to fight each other again. What I realized was that I wanted to move from my initial work with us, with you and me, with each of us individually. And what I realized was that civilization, I shed a lot of tears about this. Civilization, for all the work I'd done, look at it. What's going on here? And I realized that we also need to do work around the structure. And that's where the civilization piece comes in. But right on, yeah.
Yeah, you talk about loops, which is interesting. And as a late starter, I felt like I got stuck in the innocence and pain loop, where with regards to money, I didn't get the external or the internal influences that helped me break free of childhood with money and into adolescence or adulthood. and I got stuck in the pain. I wasn't aware that I was in pain because that's the paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. You're just running to keep from falling on your face. Yeah. And then somebody needs to tap you on the shoulder. This is the aloha. This is the giving. Tap you on the shoulder and say, maximize your 401k. And then you can move into adulthood where you're obtaining the knowledge. And people talk about diving down the rabbit hole of the FI movement or the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. And they go into the blogs, the podcasts, the vlogs. They come listen to our show. They listen to you and your workings. And they realize there's such a more brighter, larger world out there than I was living in. And it does get bigger. But then the piece where I think some of our late starters might not graduate to, because you talk about vigor, and the goal there is potentially to reach your own financial independence. There's a next level, that awakening. Tell us a little bit more about the awakening, because we want to push people to not just stop at adulthood.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to say, that we can have a misguided notion with the 7 stages, that they are a ladder that we climb, and as we finish with one rung of the ladder, we're on to the next, and we keep climbing higher and higher, and we end up at aloha. So aloha, it's a wonderful example. Aloha, living in an indigenous community in Hawaii, the people I know are filled with aloha. And yet what happened when America kind of took over Hawaii, at first they were embraced with aloha by the native people there. And what happened was the Americans with guns kind of took over. And the people that were displaced, they had gotten PhDs. They embraced our education. They traveled to England to sit with the Queen. I mean, they were in. And then we somehow took over in a way that took their land from them and took a lot of their spirit. Even though they were with all that aloha at the top, in a way they fell back quite a bit. And we can too, if we don't realize that life is all 7 of those stages all the time. When we get stuck in some place, we need to bring out those skills in adulthood. We need to get that spade out and dig the earth, We got to put our muscle into it, and we got to put our brain into it, and we got to put our good hearts into it. And if we do that, then we can climb back out again. So back to the vision piece. So we can get stuck in innocence and pain at any stage of our lives. What happens by studying these stages is that we get more and more capable of working our way through. So the difficult stages don't last as long. So you're talking about the vision stage and the aloha stage. How do we get that from vigor to that? And again, I think, and this maybe takes us toward Evoke and the other work I've done, and then maybe the 3 domains of freedom. But I think that the most incredible way to stir up more vigor, so it's beyond the money, is really to get a vision of who you really want to be. And I just want to say, I want to pitch to the people who are early in your program. I think you can do this if you're mature enough, even in your late teens and 20s. Not as well, but certainly by the time you're 30, you can be doing a lot of this work to vision who it is you really want to be. And if that vision is powerful enough, you'll be able to achieve it. As you guys have demonstrated, you can achieve it a lot quicker than you realize.
I always say that. Yeah, that's so true. It is. And yeah, I always tell people that once you get started and you get that vigor, I love that word vigor, you're going to be able to move way faster than you ever imagine. And you actually did that. So you've obviously created this incredible framework, but in the early days, like Bill was mentioning, you were a CPA, CFP. I want to hear a little bit more about your process and your evolution of starting out in an industry that already had a framework, already had a repeatable way and a repeatable path, to you saying, you know what, I've got this vigor, I've got this vision, and I want to do something different. And then that was the birth of your life planning. So Bill, what you got?
Well, there's a quote, and we're going to migrate to the 3 domains of freedom here. And the first freedom is each moment is yours. And I think that's where we're headed with this question you have for George. And I quote him by saying here, we are trapped by our habits and by the paths civilization has made available to us, paths that only promise freedom, many, many years away, hobbling into retirement. And I think that's what you mean when you ask, what was the vision when you were sitting in that cubicle potentially as a tax accountant?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it felt like a cubicle, green eye shades and all the rest. And I did primarily tax returns. That was what I did. But here's the thing that how it was I got out of there. The reason I got into tax returns is you can do them just 3 months out of the year.
Right.
If you're willing to live a very simple lifestyle, you can do them 3 months out of the year, and then you got a long vacation. And my passion from the very beginning was freedom. And freedom to me meant more about my time than it meant about money. I mean, money obviously began to interweave and more as I grew older, but I was passionate for freedom. So I was early on, Jackie and Bill, I was, in that cubicle, I was plotting out, can I sell my practice? Should I move to Costa Rica? How can I get free? Because I had a passion, and my passion was not a financial guru, not to be a visionary thought leader. My passion was to be an artist and to be to live a deep spiritual life. So those were my two passions, and the world just did not give me a path to do that and give me money. There was this saying back then, do what you love and the money will follow, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, remember that? All right. So,
Yeah.
Jackie, I never found a single person who would pay me a dime for one of my
So I'm curious. So how old are you at this point, George? When you're doing tax returns, you're like, I don't want to really do this. I want to paint. I want to do this other stuff. How old were you?
I was in my 20s.
Okay, you're in your 20s.
Yeah, I was in my 20s. But I knew even before I got tax returns, the reason I chose it was because I wanted this freedom. So I was passionate about getting freedom. And I actually think it goes back to birth, but that's for your psychology courses, and happy to talk about that. So I was passionate. And Bill's talking about this other notion. So the dream of freedom is what motivated me. And we can talk about that in the context of either 7 stages, or we can, as Bill's pulling us along, and I love it, we can go to 3 domains and look at it there. The dream of freedom is in the second domain. But the first domain is really interesting, and maybe we can interweave, go back and forth. What do you think?
Well, I find your first domain is kind of like the atom. It's the nucleus of everything. It's the genesis of the power, because people don't think about the freedom is not a place.
Right.
It's a moment. Yeah. It's this moment. It's sitting here with you right now. I am free in talking to you. And I've got to be, we have a hard time in our lives. It's constructed not to be present. Right. It's constructed to follow some habitual path, and it's almost autonomic kind of path. What we need to do, and you talk about meditation and mindfulness as ways of getting there, as structures to get there, but just being present is so hard. Why is it so hard, and why is it so important?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, we live in a world of illusion in a lot of ways around this, Bill, because, you look at, there's a trick question. You read it in the book, but there's a trick question. If I get an audience of 1,000, man, I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to get everybody to raise their hand. I'll tell them it's a trick question, but the question is, have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? Walking the beach, making love, playing with your kids, doing something wildly creative, having a great vacation. Have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, wait. Not in the past. Not in the past. I got you. I caught up to it. You can't. I mean, I'm experiencing a moment of freedom right now.
Yeah.
In creating Catching Up to 5. But no, the past is more like the shackles that hold us back.
But the past, people will remember something that feels extraordinary, which is why they raise their hand. It feels wonderful. But the truth is, the only place we've ever experienced freedom is in the present moment. That's the experience. Past doesn't have an experience. It's gone. It's a thought structure now. It's history. It's abstract. But the present moment is alive. And this is a curious thing. You're asking a curious question. Why is it that we study so much the past and the future? That's really how we navigate. That's what our courses and our education is all about. It's how we think about our lives. We constantly look at what happened in the past, and we're looking to accumulate something so we can do something in the future. So the habit is very, very strong, because we are also creatures that we're born and move through life and eventually come to death. And so there's a past and there's a future that makes a lot of sense to us. And where we're planning is really good for that, and we get some freedom from it. But we miss the greatest freedom of all. And that is that each moment we can be free. If we know the secret, if we know that, and we keep challenging ourselves to go there. And the reason I talk about mindfulness a lot, but there are many ways to do it, but mindfulness, Mother Nature is the best of all, because you just go and she's immediately talking to you. You know, her breeze is on your cheek, you feel a little warmth on the other cheek, you hear the bird songs in your ear, the wind comes flowing by, your limbs are moving. Moment after moment after moment. Do you know, talking about this freedom thing in moments, there was a Scientific American article in December of 2024, just a few months ago. And what it showed, they've now proved that thought is very, very slow. But that our senses, just think about Mother Nature in this regard, our senses experience things much faster than thought. And you might go, yeah, that makes sense. And you think about it, you go, how much faster? And you go, well, maybe 10 times as fast. What about 100 times as fast? You go, well, that maybe not. 100 million times as fast as thought, our senses are gathering information. That's just incredible. So we've got, I mean, I can't do it even after many years of mindfulness, but we have access to freedom that's much, much larger than we realize, much, much grander. And mindfulness is a practice. People think of it, oh, it's a meditation practice and it's a bit woo-woo or whatever. But it's what it is it's actually a practice to master the present moment. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
It's to expand that time, sort of stretch it out so you can live there potentially a little longer. It's really flow. How can you experience momentary flow? Like the runner's high, or the Japanese that talk about a forest path when they're walking through the woods and experiencing freedom in the woods and re-energization, if that's a word. But I experience this stuff when I'm able to clear my thoughts. I'm not in a habit. I'm out in the world, outside generally, and on a run. My thoughts are much clearer. I come up with new ideas then. People do that. When I'm sitting at my desk, it's really hard to force yourself to come up with a new idea. Yeah. I would imagine that all of your ideas came up in nature.
Absolutely. I don't know if all of them, but practically all of them. I mean, it's a huge number. And in fact, when I arrived here on Spectacle Pond, it is kind of a peninsula we've got. We've got our home. And I saw the end of the peninsula is about, 110 yards away. And I thought, and there was an old hockey shack of a cabin there it was rat infested and everything. And I thought, boy, I'm going to have windows on every side, and I'm going to immerse myself in nature. That's where I wrote all 12 of my books because of that, exactly, just to feel nature all around me.
Yeah, I was going to say, when it comes to writing, it's the same thing for me. Like, people will say they have a writing schedule and stuff like that. It doesn't work like that, right? Get in the zone, and hopefully with maybe some external things like nature sort of encouraging it. And then once you get in the heart of like writing, you just go when it's flowing. And that's how writing happens for me too. So it's so interesting that all of your writing took place with that type of setting.
Well, tell us a little bit about Spectacle Pond. I mean, you're a big fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and we have ponds in our life, we have nature in our life, but you have this pond there, and you wrote a book. Actually didn't write a book. You produced a book of photography and poems. Tell us about that, because that's where I think it sounds like you were most in tune with nature on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And it really was a book that I was doing for 30 years. I still think of it as my legacy, even though people in the world primarily see me in the money world. But when I arrived here, I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And I was just taken away by this little acre and a half. And I thought, I can do something here. This is where I was meant to be. And all my dreams of freedom, this felt like it. And what I did was I gave myself a task, which was and I used the best part of my day to make this happen. So from 6 a.m. till noon, every day for those 30 years. I would get up, I'd walk out to my cabin, and I would experience nature as I went. And I'd come back and forth some, always experiencing nature again.
You had to go to the bathroom, right?
I did. I did. Well, I'll give, as odd as I did. But and have a meal sometimes or something, or something's happening in the family and I have to deal with it. But it was my task for myself was to live in the present moment, and then to go into the cabin and compose. Also to go into the cabin and live a meditative life, or be outside and live a meditative life. So for those 6 hours, I was trying to understand what is the nature of the present moment. If it's the only moment that is really real, how come we aren't studying it? So I spent 30 years really looking at that with the great aid of Mother Nature around me and writing about it mostly in poetry, sometimes prose, and then putting together, it's nearly 1,000 pages, 2-page spreads of photography and poetry. Wish I had it right here. I show you. You can subscribe to it for free if you go on my website and get pictures of it. But so each day of the year, I wanted to provide some kind of inspiration for people to explore for themselves. What is it to be present? How do I do that? So I recorded my struggles. I recorded my successes, those blissful states that you get to when you do that kind of work. And the love of nature, absolutely. The wonder of it, the awe of it. A very different way from what, just kind of taking advantage of it, in a corporate way.
Well, I mean, it's a journal of moments, and in its own way, mentors us how to do it ourselves. I look forward to accessing it on your website. And we're a financial podcast, but look what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about the essence of life, the definition of freedom. And money is only a tool to help us reach these higher states of being so that we can afford to be free and take the time to be 6 hours in nature. We have to do it, but it isn't a goal in itself. It's only a tool, right, George?
Right on, right on. And that 6 hours in nature, I came back after those 6 hours and I'm right here in front of my computer. And I'm engaging in communication with people. I'm emails, bills that taxes need to get paid.
The reality.
The reality. Kids screaming around the room. But starting the day with a very solid chunk of what I love the most gave me an incredible amount of energy. And as you said earlier, I got a lot of ideas even about business and about family and about, real life out there as I was crafting this work on the present moment.
Yeah. And George, I was watching a lot of your videos last night where you were talking about this, but we'll definitely drop a link to your website and to the YouTube because this is definitely worth going into. But I guess for me, and I have a little bit of a financial mind, I'm a CFP and I know the financial planning world. So I am still, hang with me, Bill, I'm still trying to bridge the gap. And I know a lot of our listeners are thinking the same thing as applies to them, bridging the gap, CPA. At what point did you even get into the financial planning world where you saw this void and started the early thoughts of, I think I can do it better and I think we should be veering in this direction? That's what I want to hear about.
It was a transition. It was a movement because in a way, Jackie, I did it before I even entered the world. When I went home to my family in rural Southern Ohio, and I said, I want to be an artist. I want to do these things. And I said, I think, I said to them naively, a young man, I said, I think I'm going to be a farmer and I'll just work this many hours. And so my dad took me out to one of his favorite farmers nearby, and I watched him with his work, and he was working, many hours a day, as you know. And I came back and my dad asked me, how old do you think that guy was? And I said, boy, he looked like he was 70. And he said, no, he was 46 years old. Wow. And it's just the way he was weather beaten. He worked like crazy. Mm-hmm. And I would never have been able to do my writing. So my mom said, go do tax returns for a living. Try that. And that was really cool. So right from the beginning, I was thinking, how do I use money so I can be free? Mm-hmm. And then as I was good at math. I mean, I started off as a math major at Harvard, and I ended up being in English because I also had this imagination, but I was terrible when I was at the high school that Bill and I went to. I was terrible in English, but I ended up doing it because I don't know. I wanted to be well-rounded. I don't know what it was, but in the long run, I wanted to be free. And so as I was building that tax practice, I realized, hey, maybe I could sell this. So that was an idea. So it was before I got the CFP. And then I realized, the way I can learn this, I went and saw some CFPs, and they were, I hate to say it, but the people that I saw were horrible. I mean, they were, in those days, they were, and still we have some today, they were salespeople. And they were not listening to me at all. And I thought financial planning would be about my life and getting me to where I wanted to go. And all they really wanted to do was sell me a limited partnership. I mean, it was terrible. So I came back from that experience and I thought, I think maybe I need to get a CFP because I know money can give me this freedom. It can set up the structure so I can live the life of freedom I want to live. So I went back and got it. And pretty much right away as I was doing it, this was in the early 80s, I think I won the bronze medal in the CPA exam in Massachusetts in 1975.
Wow, look at you. I didn't know that. Yeah. There you go. I was about to say, how hard was the CFP exam? Well, clearly you did great on it.
The part that was hardest was the part I knew the best because I knew taxes left, right, and center. And the CFP exam is pretty superficial. I mean, I don't want to, but compared to someone who really knows it and who's read many, many tax volumes, you can figure reasons and things that go beyond what they really want you to answer. So anyway, but I did very well on it. And this CFP program is fantastic. And I just want to give a shout out to it because it's one of the ways that we can be fiduciary for our clients, which means putting their interests first. Life planning is another way. But I was right from the beginning looking at this question, how can I get free? And what happened was, as I intermingled my financial planning practice with my tax clients, I began to ask them questions about their life and who they really wanted to be, because those were the questions I was asking myself. And I was discovering that every single one of them didn't want to be what they were and didn't want to be doing what they were doing. And I thought I was all alone because I had this artist side, but they didn't. They had different goals, but they felt the same way. And I thought, wow, well, we're not addressing that in financial planning. And one of the first workshops I went to, one of the first conferences I went to was at NAPFA, the fee-only organization. And back then it was revolutionary. And that organization, the one course was on goal setting. And I went to it and the person asked some life and death questions. And I thought, that's it. If you ask people some life and death questions, something that gets them kind of feel the fear of not living their life the way they really want to live it, then that's going to motivate them to do the kind of work that you two did with FIRE, around figuring out what the tasks are around money to get me where I want to go. So my thought was, and it was related to me. I had a great burning passion, and that's what drove me. And I thought, let me find out what that burning passion is for everybody I meet. And then we'll get them there.
Well, this brings up the 3 famous Kinder questions.
Yeah.
You probably can't get through a talk. You can't get through a podcast. You can't get through anything without answering these questions, but they're pivotal. And they're in your book. In the second domain of freedom, Your Life is Yours. It helps people distill and crystallize what their life really means. Take us through those questions and maybe ask them of one of us.
Yeah, great. All right. So here, and let me do a little preamble because we're going through the book in a way. So we just tapped the first domain of freedom, which is each moment is yours. And I just want to pause. You spoke to the profundity of it. I want to pause with that for a moment because how many billions of moments, given what Scientific American just told us, do we have every day? So that's incredible to realize that in any moment I can pause and experience freedom. That's amazing. And I try to give ways of doing that in the book, of course. But that's incredible. It's the most profound of all.
Well, one of the ways you do it, and before we skip past this, is this map of mindfulness. Is there a way you can verbally give us a visual representation? Because this isn't sit down on a pillow, do meditation to get there. Everybody can do this. Right. And you gave us a construct called the Map of Mindfulness.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm proud of. Very few people know about it, but I think it's a kind of a revolutionary kind of thing. And if the present moment is the most real moment and the only really real moment that we experience, it's the only moment we experience, then how come when we look at maps of time and space, we don't see the present moment in all its glory, in all its experience of freedom, in all its freshness and wonder? Why isn't that at the center of the map? And it made me realize that the maps we normally see, these ovals of time and space, are abstract. They don't have the present moment anywhere there. If anything, it's totally ephemeral. But that's not how I experience it. That's not how I experience the two of you right now. I mean, this is a wonderful engagement we're having with each other. What could be more extraordinary than this? It's not this tiny little ephemeral thing. So what I did was I said, that map's got to be wrong. There's got to be a better map of the universe, of how the universe works, with the present moment at its center. So what I did was I created this oval at the top. I left the oval there, that oval of time and space, and I put that oval at the top like of an hourglass, right? And at the center of the hourglass is the present moment. Now, there's more to it. This is only halfway through. We're halfway through. And that present moment has this engagement relationship with time and space, which is pretty cool, in all kinds of ways. We have our kids, we have culture, we have, plans, we have, all kinds of ways. So what happens in that oval is civilization, the self, all of our definitions of who we are, and time and space. Here's the present moment. What else is there? There's something else. And what else is there is that what I did was I created a bottom oval. So you've got the present moment at the top now, and there's an oval down here. And what I found from my work on Spectacle Pond and from my work with mindfulness was that if you really focus on the present moment, your whole sense of self, of your whole self-centeredness, your selfishness, your I, me, and mine diminishes. And so what happens in that bottom oval is great peace, great virtue, and great spirit. And you feel that more. So that first domain is incredibly profound. And thank you for bringing that map up. It's a powerful.
It sounds like that's where you experience enlightenment and aloha.
I think,
and that's where the stages of money maturity probably come in. I love the fact that it's an hourglass. In some ways, the stages of money maturity start at the top and migrate through the hourglass, through the present moment to the bottom and that oval. I love that metaphor, and I want to make sure everybody goes to your book, The Three Domains of Freedom, and sees it visually depicted.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's worth contemplating, really looking at it and then thinking about it. And I think it helps you to be more curious about, can I be here more? And what can I learn from that moment I step out into nature from my home? Or can I just do it right now at my desk? And those are wonderful. The more you do it, the more freedom you have. So that's the first domain of freedom. And where we were headed with the three questions, that's where we're going, is the second domain of freedom. And let me give you the arc of it first, and then we'll go right to the three questions. So the second domain is really interesting because it's how we identify ourselves. We think of ourselves, you guys in your podcasts, about your life experience. You tell a story that's incredibly moving about who you were and what you had to go through to come to that moment where you woke up and you realized, oh, I've got to do things differently. And then you went forward with that. So for most of us, we have something like that. And Joseph Campbell in his mythological writings called it the hero's journey. And we go through a darkness, we come to a moment of awakening, and then we expand, and we're able to do many more things. Just an incredible thing. It is a hero's journey. What you guys have done is heroic, and you're now modeling that with your podcast, which is really cool. But everybody has their version of that in a way, and it's this trajectory, right? From birth to death. And there's a story. So we've all got our stories. And the question that what I realized with that, and this is back to life planning and the three questions, is I want to live that life. I always wanted to live that life, maximizing the amount of freedom in that story, which doesn't always map each moment because moments are just right here. Whereas the story has some past and some future in it. And I'm going somewhere. I'm on a mission, man. I'm going to make something happen. And so that's where the three questions are these questions that ask, they can get kind of deep, but they're deep in a really good way. They make you think about, how should I be living? How do I really want to live? What's the meaning of life in a way, my life, this trajectory, this story of my life? So should I share them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
And I'm willing to try answering them too, if you want a guinea pig.
Let's go. Let's go for it. That's fantastic, Bill. All right. And Jackie, are we stealing your thunder? Is that all right if we go to Bill on this one?
No, that's totally fine.
I'd actually like to hear Jackie's answer to these questions too, because I think hers are more evolved and robust than mine might be.
Well, and also our audience, I would like for them in their own space to pause and answer these questions for themselves as well.
I think that's great. And if you're listening after the fact, you can pause the recording and just take notes. That's what I do. I take 3 to 5 minutes. And your first thoughts are really good. So don't think you have to think about, they're big questions. I got to think about this. But no, put 5 minutes of writing in and you'll have a really good response. So the first question, you do them in order because it's tough to go deep first. So the first one is just this experience of freedom. It's about money, and it is, you win the lottery or, you get an inheritance, something happens and you wake up and you realize, holy cow, I've got everything I need for the rest of my life financially. I've got everything I need, right? And in a way, it's fire, right? Yeah. And I got everything I need for the rest of my life. It's not like you'd be as rich as J.K. Rowling or Elon Musk or, one of those ultra billionaires. No, you just have everything. You have enough that you can do everything you really want to do in your life. And then the question is, what would you do? What would you do with it? And so scribble down your answers. Take some time and scribble down your answers. And I'm going to ask this directly of Bill and then Jackie, if she wants to answer it too. What would you do? And so what are your thoughts? You have all the money you need for the rest of your life. What would you do, Bill?
Well, this is about the definition of enough, and in some ways, the definition of freedom. You've reached monetary freedom, and are you happy with what you're doing now, and what would you do different? And I think I've evolved past that fact that I'm happy with what I'm doing now, at least professionally. I would stop probably doing what I'm doing professionally. And I've been a physician for years and years, taking care of people's health, but not my own wealth. And I want to take care of wealth now, and wealth of knowledge, wealth of freedom, not just wealth of money. It's life planning, right? Maybe I would be a CFP life planner. Maybe I can still do that because I've got the best years ahead of me. And I just need to take the classes and evolve through those. I've got a lot of the knowledge. I just need to distill it into the constructs that society accepts in order to be able to practice. Now, Jackie's a financial educator, and maybe that would just be my role and not necessarily take care of people's wealth. I don't know, but I would definitely would stop what I'm professionally doing now. But the rest of it, the personal enough, I have it. It exists in front of me. The answer to this question is always, if you're designing a house, what do I need to do with this? Well, the answer is in what's right in front of you. And you can look past that and, your glasses just aren't focused correctly, like the mindfulness map. You need to focus on the moment because the answer is in the moment, I think. So I wouldn't do what I would do now. I would spend my time educating financially. I would spend my time doing this podcast because for me, just like for you, what lit me up, I had my wake-up call, which is where I experienced in that hourglass the moment. I woke up in the moment and I realized I needed to spend life differently in order to achieve the bottom half of the mindfulness map. And the moment for me later was I was a consumer of creativity. I would read the books, I would listen to the podcasts, and I went down that rabbit hole. But I evolved into being a creator, just like yourself. And this podcast was like a launching pad for creativity. The right side of my brain had just atrophied. I had not exercised it. I've been living in the left side of my brain in those habitual things, the sort of the mechanics of life, and not in the creative pursuits of life, the flow. And this podcast and working with Jackie, being able to meet you, that's where things exploded.
Fabulous. Boy, that is so exciting, Bill. And really, wow. I mean, I feel like I'm getting to the core of things right away with the very first question. And that doesn't always happen. Often it's more about traveling. And
you can travel in the moment. We are momentary travelers. How about that?
Love it, love it, love it. And Jackie, do you want to respond for yourself?
Sure. Well, and I want to say to Bill, I kind of knew that would be your answer. As someone that spends a lot of time with you on the podcast, if I'm chatting with people, I always say, if Bill could leave that doctor job tomorrow, he would. Because I see your energy, I see your passion, and I see how it lights you up. So I feel that already. I feel that energy. I feel that vigor, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So I think for me, I've been retired for 6 years. I retired in December of 2019, right before COVID. But at that point, a lot of people might say, oh, you don't have enough money. You shouldn't be retiring. You need to keep working. And to your point, George, I had to answer that question for myself. And that was my enough. I had gotten to my enough to where I felt like my cup runneth over and I want to make an impact. I think of big words like legacy. I don't just want to make sure me and my daughter and my family are okay and learn about this money stuff in relation to finding freedom or as a tool to find freedom. I want to make sure many, many generations in the future have this. And I think a lot about, reflecting of where I came from. I just don't think a lot of communities that were underserved, poor, barely making ends meet, that's how I grew up. I think a lot about that because it's so close to me and so close to what I know. These people are just as smart as a lot of the people I find that are professionals, that have degrees, that are wealthy. So how do we give this information and educate and teach these people to the point where they realize they can overcome this money part like we did and be able to have the freedom to do the things that they love. So mine would be all around a generational, building a legacy for years, decades, centuries to come. And plus, I'd probably love a big mansion with a lot of nature around, with a lot of nature around. And this is something weird. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Bill, but I've always wanted like a personal chef and nutritionist that would be there. And I would want to have a staff that were well treated and they were a part of learning how to build on what they have so that they can reach the freedom to live the life that they want. Everyone around me, I would want that for.
Yeah, and you're outsourcing the things that you don't necessarily want to do with your life and letting some of the mechanics of it be somebody else's passion so that you can pursue a more focused version of your passion.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I just have to respond. I mean, first of all, I'm going to come to the heart of your notion in a moment, but the last things that you mentioned are common responses. Having a bigger house, maybe not a mansion, but maybe a mansion. If you have all the money you need, why not?
Yeah.
And
I want to buy your house, George. I want the pond. I want Spectacle Pond. Is there a lot or a neighbor's home that would allow me to live next to you? I want that house.
Well, keep in touch, Bill. There's a strong pull for me right now towards civilization over in London. So keep in touch. So the mansion and nature, the personal chef, my wife always has the personal chef in that first question for her. And I've seen it in multiple places, having a staff, absolutely fabulous. And, having all the money you need, and then you can do all the things you want to do. That's just fantastic. But I want to speak for a moment, just personally to your sharing, because you touched me in a way that connects with who I am and how I've felt and how I grew up. And also growing up in the town that I grew up in. I mean, I don't know how I got to the great school I do know, but that's another story that Bill and I went to. But
I had never heard of the school. This is an interesting story. And it was a New England prep school. I had lived in England for a year, went to a small boys' private school, thrived in a smaller environment. It had nothing to do with it being private. everybody had to work together in order to create the community. I was captain of the basketball team. I was a monitor in the school. There were only 25 people in my class. I came home and got lost in a very large public school. I became unhappy. I became depressed. And I went to my parents and I said, I want to go away.
Yeah.
I just want to go away. I don't know where, but I want to go away. And they took my word, and my mom took Better Homes and Gardens that had an article on prep schools in it. And she read about 3 or 4 of them and said, okay, these are the 3 or 4 we'll look at for you. And I landed at our combined prep school, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
It totally changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah. That's such a powerful story, Bill. Beautiful. And you were coming from Chicago, right? At that
point I was in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, so you're south. Because
North Carolina hasn't heard of New England prep schools by and large.
No, nor had the small southern Ohio town that I lived in. They didn't have a clue about it. And my mother would talk always about how poor the education was where we were. I mean, it was a really, really, really poor school. And the people around us, it was coal mining area, strip mining area, and the people were poor. And I grew up more with the middle class contingent of that. But I always felt that, we grew up on the edge of the Ohio River Valley, where in the Great Depression, they had the highest levels of unemployment. And in the Rust Belt, they had the highest levels of unemployment. Anyway, the family was involved in all that, caring about all of that. And I grew up feeling the same way Jackie expressed her feeling, was that these people that I've grown up with are as smart as anybody. When I went to the big school, I felt that they weren't any smarter. They might have had better education backgrounds, but they weren't any smarter. They weren't any better. They weren't any kinder. And so my passion also, and Jackie, I'm with you. I'm with you for generations, centuries. I'm with you. I want you to have this. This is incredible to hear you say that. And no wonder you came up with the word visionary. And I feel the same thing. And it's an honor to meet you and hear your vision. I just wanted to say that to you because that's...
and everybody has the visionary in them.
Yeah,
they just have to tap into it. It's like a large oil well that they just haven't found yet. And they've got to do the work and drill for it. And everybody has the power to make a difference. And that's what we're going to get to with civilization, I'm sure.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptophi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Phi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Phi. Cheers.